What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Friday edition of On Q. I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Don't forget, check us out on our YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q. Appreciate all the engagement. And we are always brought to you by our wonderful friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensbridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. You can follow us on IG and X as well at Rich Q on Q. We'll have some new content next week as well. Don't forget, we also started back up Double Jab Boxing podcast as well. So with that being said, we got two more Football Fridays, if you will. Our good friend Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, part of the Broad Street South Network. Follow him on X as well, at Lloyd Vance. And I guess we've got another week to talk about the Super Bowl. The line really hasn't moved too much. 49ers and Kansas City. We'll get into props and player totals and predictions, and we'll go within the battle of the trenches, so to speak. And we got so much ground to cover with that. Never really liked that bye week, if you will, but it is what it is. But a lot of movement right now in the NFL from a head coaching standpoint. And really, and I'll start with this, Lloyd, the Washington Commanders have named Dan Quinn their new head coach. And obviously Quinn comes from a defensive coordinator background. It was one of his issues, if you will, in Atlanta. But what does this say right now about Washington, where we talked about, well, you don't want to see some of these old retreads here and there, but yet they turn around and they hire Dan Quinn to replace Ron Rivera?
Yeah, Q, it's a situation where the ownership group, Joshua Harris there in Washington, they're going to go who's most comfortable with and who interviews the best. And Washington cast a large net. They talked to, I think, about 6, 7 guys. I think the guy they really wanted was Ben Johnson from the Lions. But he kind of said, no, we have unfinished business to do in Detroit, going back there. Dan Quinn, obviously, a guy who you talked about being in Atlanta. He has already been head coach, kind of understands the situation out there around the league. Did a nice job with Dallas for the most part. Yes, the playoff game did not go the way that he wanted to, but he was one of the names out there, and he's getting an opportunity. So this hiring cycle has been kind of interesting, Q, because we've seen a hodgepodge of guys. You've seen some retreads, you've seen some new guys come in, and then surprisingly, out of the 8 openings, 5 of the guys were defensive guys.
Yeah, and it kind of tells you the direction that the NFL is going. Obviously, with their new GM, speaking of Washington, the Commanders, Adam Peters. You mentioned Quinn's numbers, right? The stats, if you will, and that was kind of his issue, defense in Atlanta. But again, aside from what transpired when he was with Dallas in that playoff game, I still believe they're going to go offense. I still believe you're going to look at a quarterback. They have the second overall pick in April's draft. But then the follow-up is, well, what about Eric Bieniemy now? And you look at some of the numbers. So Bieniemy and Tavita Pritchard, their quarterbacks coach, are both under contract for 2024. But statistically, from an offensive standpoint, 25th in the league when it came to scoring, just under 20 points. 15th when it came to passing yards, right around 240. 27th in rushing, just under 100. And then points for 329th, which sat at 25th in the league. And typically when you have a new head coach, the head coach wants to do what? He wants to bring in his guys, coordinators, offense, defense. Where does this leave Eric Bieniemy? I mean, can they turn around, even though he's under contract? Can you see them moving away from Eric Bieniemy?
That's an interesting question, Q, because as you said, he has a 2-year deal or so with Commanders. And a lot of these assistants, if they want to keep them around, they can. Obviously, all the head coaching jobs have filled up. I'm hearing Quinn is going to have a conversation with Bieniemy, and then they'll kind of go from there. But as you were saying, a lot of these guys want to bring in somebody that they formerly worked with, somebody that is on the same page with him. I've already heard Joe Witt, who was working with him for Dallas in terms of DB's coach, he may move over as a defensive coordinator. Have not heard a lot in terms of offensive coordinator, so maybe Bieniemy has a shot. Bieniemy probably has already talked to Harris. Maybe they have some kind of contingency out there. But as you've alluded to, all the openings are kind of being filled at this point, and you're wondering where Bieniemy's going to go. He deserves an opportunity, Q. Now, head coach wise, I don't know. It's been so many years, and the time has passed between when he burst on the scene with the Chiefs and now with Washington, and you wonder if he's ever going to get his opportunity. It's an odd situation out there.
Yeah, you also wonder how long he also wants to continue being reshuffled as an offensive coordinator and bouncing around the franchise to franchise. The whole point of Bieniemy leaving Kansas City was to get under out under, I should say, from Andy Reid's looming shadow, right? And he goes to Washington. The first couple of weeks, everything looked good. Sam Howell putting up a lot of yardage. They need another quarterback. I think now you can kind of cancel out the idea of bringing in a bridge quarterback. I think that's kind of out the window, especially with the second overall draft pick. But it just begs the question: what are they not seeing? What are they not feeling? Where's the lack of chemistry? When it comes to Eric Bieniemy, I've had James Hasty on several times, former defensive back with Kansas City and the Jets. He's tight with Bieniemy. He's spoken to Eric Bieniemy about the interviewing process and has given him some critique, some criticism, some pointers. But the rumors, the thought over the last couple of years is that he just does not interview well. Now, again, does that translate to being a good head coach or a bad head coach? I don't know. We've seen and heard guys stand up there in their press conference and say all the right things, and then they don't even last a year or two in the NFL. So it does beg the question, what is he doing wrong? And I guess if we're not in that room, we really don't have answers to that.
Yeah, Q, it's tough because I've heard similar feedback around the league, well-respected guy, but you're right. When it comes time for these guys to sit in front of the owner, sit in front of the general manager, they have to sell themselves. And a lot of people have presented this as, is it a black coach type of thing? Well, we saw some opportunities this time for black coaches right away. Mayo got a job right away. Raheem Morris got his opportunity, and Pierce goes from interim to the head coach with the Raiders. So I don't per se think that's that. Hopefully the NFL's turned the page and as everybody's getting the best opportunity out there. But Bieniemy has got to. These guys are billionaires, and he has to talk their language. He has to first and foremost present himself as a CEO. Q, and that's what a lot of these owners are looking for. They're looking for somebody that's a leader of men, can run a staff. A lot of times they don't want somebody that's only focused on one side of the football. They have to see the whole picture, and also they have to be the face of the team. So, you would hope Bieniemy gets his opportunity, but as you said, something is amiss there, and maybe he can find a good landing spot down the road. But it may take some time on another staff, and it's going to take an owner to give him that chance.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you bring up, a leader of men, and maybe they don't want that aggressive personality. They want a guy that's going to be able to defer to his coaching staff, someone that doesn't want all the power, i.e., a Bill Belichick. I want to stick in the NFCs for a moment. So again, I don't know where these, I think it was just spitballing from Philadelphia with some of these group balls with Philly sports talk, this whole idea of the Eagles should put A.J. Brown on the market. They should look to trade A.J. Brown. I mean, just from a number standpoint, if you crunch the numbers, it's really an asinine thing to say. It's a lazy take. He is a big-time threat, big-time wide receiver. But numbers, if you just really just encapsulate the numbers, that massive 4-year deal, it'd be a $12 million cap hit this season, $42 million dead cap hit, dead cap money. So I don't know. There have been some of these reports now. The reason that Jalen Hurts flew to Seattle, it was documented, Tony Bruno on his network with an insider and guest that they believe Hurts flew separately, didn't want to be with the team. We were talking about Hurts being sick at that moment. I don't know what to really believe, but I know this: no matter what, Nick Sirianni is definitely a lame duck head coach going into the season. And again, we talk about the retreads. You turn around, you bring in Moore as offensive coordinator, you bring in Fangio as defensive coordinator. You've got a couple of veterans. We'll have to see if they're going to come back. I mean, look at some of the guys. Like, for instance, Penny, everyone talked about that. Swift, everyone talked about that. These guys aren't going to come back. You got some of these aging veterans. We still don't know what Kelsey's going to do. Fletcher Cox played relatively well. You got to look at Brandon Graham wants to come back for his 15th season. So they're going to be a vastly looking different team, but I just don't know if you're going to be able to kind of fix all these holes and all these cracks within that locker room in one off season? I don't know, but is this much to do about nothing? These the speculation or the thought that the Eagles are looking or should be looking, because then with the same token, the report came out that they reached out to Belichick.
Well, Q, it's very interesting. A lot of moving parts with the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. You had two teams. Everyone just assumed right away that they were going to bring in new head coaches, and both ownership groups decided, all right, we're going to give these coaches one more try.
Yep.
They both have a year left on their contract. Bring them back. Let's see what's out there. But in terms of the Eagles, I'll start with the Brown situation first and foremost. They're not giving anybody away, and he's got a good contract in terms of value. It's not like Tyreek Hill where he was going to get paid so much that they had to jettison him. They still got Brown under contract for the next couple of years. I think Howie Roseman wants him around, and he's a guy they're going to build around. Jalen Hurts, obviously, they have a lot of work to do with him in terms of what's going on there. But Sirianni, he does have a lot of work to do, and there's going to be a totally new roster. As you said, I expect at least 10 plus players to turn around on his team, particularly on the defense. They need to bring in a lot of new guys on that side of the ball, and it's going to be interesting to see how all these pieces. They bring Kellen Moore, who's really a Dallas Cowboys guy. Yes, he was with the Chargers at the last year, and then you're also bringing in Fangio, who has head coaching experience. Don't forget about that. He's going to be there. And can all these guys work together? And I've seen this, Q, where you have guys that have not had prior relationships with one another, and they're putting them on staffs together, and it kind of just blows up. So, it's going to be an interesting atmosphere as we go to the draft. The Eagles, first and foremost, Q, we've talked about it over again. They got to fix that defense. And then offensively, Jalen Hurts has got to get on the same page with Moore and maybe get some more talent in the draft, particularly the Eagles, knowing them, they'll probably look at an offensive lineman to help them out.
Yeah, they might actually add another running back, could potentially add a wide receiver, but that's the conversation for April, Friday edition of On Cue. Rich Quinones here, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. We're brought to you by our very good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Holt's new offensive coordinator with the Titans. Kingsbury, little surprise there, new offensive coordinator with the Raiders. I mean, we kind of saw his track record. I think the Raiders are a team too where that you're going to need a quarterback. I mean, there are teams out there where you bring in new head coaches or rip off the interim tag, you bring in coordinators. That's a team that's going to be in the market for a quarterback as well. I do want to ask, because I know I only have you for a couple more minutes. I would like to get into this Jet situation with your guy, Robert Saleh, because it came out that The Athletic wrote a really interesting, and by the way, we didn't need to get an expose from The Athletic to know that the New York Jets are a friggin' train wreck. But it was an article that came out Wednesday by Deanna Rossini and Zach Rosenblatt that talked about pretty much a paranoid head coach and an offensive coordinator over his head. And again, just to kind of paraphrase, we know Aaron Rodgers is running the show. We know he's running that franchise. That's one of the reasons he wanted Robert Saleh back, Hackett back, what have you. But there were these reports that behind closed doors that Robert Saleh was basically telling coaches, not to leak anything, threatened to take coaches' phones to identify leaks. Quote, if you come forward now, you won't get in trouble. I mean, it's a mess. And apparently, after a 4-7 start, he reportedly researched how teams led by the NFL's best coaches perform without their starting quarterback, which it's listen, he's not a good head coach. I don't know why in the world they haven't fired him. You missed a butt. I mean, now you can still turn around and you can jettison him. You can fire him. Again, the loyalty, the reluctance to sit earlier, to bench Zach Wilson, to constantly defend him, a missed horrible play. And then you got the Rodgers stuff where basically just, indicting himself as the team's biggest distraction, right? I mean, and then all of a sudden a week, 2-3 weeks later, a guy has having a cup of coffee with the Jets after four snaps, pardon me. and he's talking about, we need to keep things in house. It's a mess, man. And I really just, again, this is paraphrase. Rodgers' issues with leaks apparently did not sit well with Robert Saleh, who was even more paranoid in the aftermath of the Wilson story. That sent Saleh into a tailspin. The coach held a meeting with his staff 2 days later when he asked the leaker to reveal himself, according to multiple people in attendance. If you come forward now, you won't get in trouble. He told them threatening to take their cell phones. What are you, 6 years old? Staffers were bemused by Saleh's obsession with the Wilson story and his reaction to it. And by the way, it didn't help that he goes on WFAN and he's leaking crap to Joe Beningo, who's a diehard Jets fan and no longer really a radio talent. Had his run on radio, and you're texting pretty much now a fan, not really a member of the media. So you hear all this crap and you say to yourself, why is this guy still employed by the New York Jets?
Q, I know you love Welcome Back, Potter. But who's he, Mr. Woodman?
Yeah, exactly.
You go to Mr. Woodman's office.
That's right.
Who did it? Who did it? He won't get the attention, but the rest of the guys will. I mean, seriously. I mean, what are we talking about here, Q? It's a fractured organization. It's a mess from top to bottom. And you're right. Woody Johnson, obviously, he does not want to pay Saleh a salary and then hire a new big name head coach. And it's going to be hanging out there all season if he's not getting this thing done. If Joe Douglas, who's general manager, is not getting the job done. Obviously, Belichick's out there. He has relations with them. They're in the Northeast. Everybody trying to connect the dots. You also have Mike Vrabel, who's going to be out there as well. You have two big name coaches out there. So all these coaches that are going into the season on the hot seat, whether it's Matt Eberflus with the Bears, you talk about Robert Saleh with the Jets, McCarthy with Dallas, so they're going to feel the heat right away. So they got to clean this thing up. But organizationally, if he's not on the same page with his assistant coaches, and these are guys that are supposed to be your most loyal lieutenants, every guy that I've talked to that's been a head coach, they know they're their guys, and they already know not to talk to the media. They close ranks. Once the season starts, everybody has their little training camp tour and all that, but then they close ranks, and typically a good team, you're not hearing a lot come out from the assistant coaches, and a lot of times they don't even let those guys talk to the media. So if he's got leaks, if he's got problems, it's just showing future problems with this organization. Obviously, they gave Aaron Rodgers that 2-year deal. They want to bring him back. Hopefully, he can stay healthy more than 4 snaps. But that Achilles injury is very bad for a guy who's 40 years old, and they just got a mess there, Q. So, this offseason is going to be another one for, much like we were talking about the Eagles, another one. There's going to be a lot of moving parts to this offseason for the Jets, and we'll see if they can clean it up. And me, I just don't think Saleh he's not the guy. He's just not the guy, but he has the job for now.
Yeah, I just don't understand if your head coach is paranoid to the point where he's complaining about negative coverage, whether it be in the Post or Newsday or the Daily News or in Sports Talk Radio in New York, and then he wants to know what coaches are texting, reporters. You think about the health of the franchise, it's not really a strong foundation. And then furthermore, he's texting a glorified diehard fan now, and that gets out. I mean, that's like when that happens, at that moment, he should have been gone. He should have been gone. I mean, you're airing, that dirty laundry. You're basically just leaving it out there, and you're letting for everyone kind of fend for themselves. And that's pretty much why this franchise hasn't won anything since '69. And I part of me also believes, as we kind of close it out, man, I'll tell you, who's to say Rodgers is even going to be 100%? Who's to say Rodgers even wants to play, right? I know he's said he wants to play. He teased the fan base by saying he was going to come back. That was a crock. Why? Because he's got an ego. He wanted to keep going on McAfee, getting paid. He wanted everyone to just shed that light, that attention, don't shine it off of him. But who's to say he's even really going to want to play, knowing all this crap next year? And who's to say that he's going to be 100% healthy and effective? So, man, I'll tell you, it's a mess, man.
It is. And there's no guarantees out there. And you would hope they need to jettison a lot of people on that team. There's at least 10 guys that they need to get rid of, and people that he brought there that just have not worked out, and like Randall Cobb, for example, his time's passed, and give some younger guys an opportunity. And it's a tough division now. So the Dolphins are a very good team, and it's competitive. So the Jets have a lot of work to do, and we'll see if they're able to turn this thing around. But as you said, anytime your head coach is talking to the media outside of his press conferences, that's not a good thing. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah,
You have, we were talking about, you should be a CEO type. You have so much more other stuff to worry about than leak information
no doubt.
to, one of your crony writer friends.
Yeah, and lastly, their crosstown rival, if you will, the New York Giants. Their options right now for defensive coordinator are pretty much dwindling. I would have loved to saw them go after Mike Rabel. I already told you that. It was a pretty much ugly fallout between Wink Martindale and Brian Daboll. And the other thing too is, with Belichick now not having a spot, Daboll, I believe, goes into the season also as a lame duck head coach. And I'm not going to say Joe Shane as well, but again, pretty interesting when you think about it right now. They don't have a ton of feelers. I'm hearing the name Shane Bowen, Brandon Daly. It's almost like slim pickings here. So the Giants right now might be stuck holding the bag. No defensive coordinator as we speak.
Yeah, Q, it's tough because if you're the Senior Bowl's this week, and that's like the convention of all the coaches in the NFL, and they're all down there, boots on the ground. But you don't want to be looking for individuals there to fill out your staff. A high name still out there is Ehiro Evero.
Yep.
They're talking about he may have an opportunity to be defensive coordinator in Carolina. He's been there before. So we'll see if he's able to get out of Carolina. New staff coming there. But you're right, Q. You don't want to grab that last coach. Hopefully they can find an up and coming coach, somebody that's out there that's maybe a linebackers coach, and they can give him his opportunity to kind of step forward. That's what the Ravens just did with Orr. He was their linebackers coach, and now he's going to be their defensive coordinator.
All right, good stuff from Lloyd on a Friday edition of On Cue. Next week, we will dive into, as they like to say, the big game, Super Bowl, 49ers and Kansas City, a rematch from a couple years ago in which if Jimmy Garoppolo actually hits a wide receiver in the third quarter, maybe the narrative for Jimmy Garoppolo changes, maybe the narrative for the 49ers, and maybe Kansas City is not the, quote, little dynasty that we're seeing right now. So we'll see if they can go and repeat. Very rare to do by today's NFL standards. Give Lloyd a follow on socials or at Lloyd Vance. And of course, you can hear him next week. Will be a Monday or Tuesday. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 102.9 The Game.
It should be Monday.
All right.
Monday.
All right.
We're going to get going at 8:00 and preview the game.
All right. We will be tuned in, and you and I will do a very comprehensive and deep dive into the Super Bowl. A lot of information to get to, but always appreciate a couple moments, pal. Have a good weekend.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.